Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor, from #BlackLivesMatter to Black Liberation. From #BlackLivesMatter to Black Liberation, Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor sheds light on the enduring struggle of African Americans for equal rights despite the abolition of slavery and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Delving into historical events and political developments, Taylor explores the origins of systemic racism and its connection to capitalism. The book also highlights the rise and impact of the Black Lives Matter movement in response to ongoing police violence and racial inequality. This summary aims to give readers a better understanding of the various factors that contribute to the current state of race relations in America.
Unraveling Racial Inequality. Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor delves deep into the roots of racial inequality in America, examining structural mechanisms perpetuating disparities. She emphasizes the importance of understanding history and political ideologies in addressing social and economic inequality. Taylor's thorough analysis demonstrates that transforming the current state of affairs requires a radical rethinking of societal norms and a robust commitment to advocating for justice and equality on all fronts. Beyond freedom, seeking equality. Though slavery was abolished during the Civil War, freedom alone wasn't enough for African Americans to achieve true equality. President Lyndon B. Johnson's Civil Rights Act of 1964 outlawed discrimination, but persistent issues like crime and poverty continue to plague Black communities today. These problems are often blamed on cultural weaknesses, with figures like Paul Ryan attributing high unemployment rates to a culture problem and President Obama linking violence to poor choices by Black youth. Such claims divert attention from the true causes of poverty and inequality while perpetuating the inaccurate idea that Black people are lazy and resistant to authority. In reality, the legacy of slavery and sustained economic struggles have deeply impacted African American communities, with social welfare programs facing drastic cuts during the Nixon and Reagan administrations. As racial inequalities persist long after the Civil Rights Movement, a new Black liberation movement is now emerging to address these ongoing challenges. Beyond the colorblind facade. Believing that anti-racism legislation has turned the United States into a post-racial or colorblind society is gravely mistaken. This illusion enabled politicians in the 1970s to conceal an insidious agenda that suppressed Black communities. Instead of acknowledging that racism contributed to impoverished communities, the narrative suggested that poverty and crime were outcomes of Black culture. Consequently, the Nixon administration did not increase welfare spending but expanded law enforcement, leading to the traumatic mass incarceration of the Black population that has persisted to this day. Many were led to believe that passing legislation against racism would magically erase it from American society, thereby creating a post-racial nation. However, this erroneous perception veiled the discrimination that persisted well into the 1970s. By labeling America as colorblind, politicians cleverly denied the existence of racism and justified a harmful political strategy that further oppressed Black communities. The colorblind narrative allowed people to dismiss racism's contribution to worsening socioeconomic conditions in Black communities. Poverty, crime, and unemployment were thus portrayed as products of Black culture, rather than systemic discrimination. This mindset paved the way for the Nixon administration to implement an array of prejudiced economic policies, starting from 1969. By touting America as a free and open society, the Nixon administration shifted blame for poverty and crime onto individuals and their supposed poor choices. Maintaining that these challenges were beyond the scope of social policies, the government refrained from investing in welfare programs. Instead, the administration intensified law enforcement efforts, intending to subdue Black communities and suppress protests. This marked the beginning of a cruel mass incarceration legacy that profoundly harmed the Black population in America. Although law enforcement targeted all leftist organizations in the 1970s, the Black communities suffered the most severe consequences. The rise of a new Black elite in the 1980s did little to abate this vicious cycle of mass incarceration that has plagued the Black population for decades. Progress hindered by systemic barriers. While recognizing April 19, 2015, as the day 25-year-old Freddie Gray tragically died in Baltimore due to police brutality, it's essential to acknowledge the wider context that contributed to the situation. Despite milestones, such as the election of Carl Stokes as the first black mayor of a major U.S. city in 1967 and Barack Obama as the first black president in 2009, the U.S. political system has failed to improve the conditions for its poorest citizens, especially African Americans. Regardless of their race, the mayors have had to cut taxes to raise campaign funds from local businesses, leaving social services underfunded and unable to make a difference. The lack of progress in addressing poverty, unemployment, housing, and health issues leaves black citizens disillusioned and frustrated, putting equal civil rights and genuine change further out of reach. Beyond slavery, covert discrimination. Though the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in 1865, Southern states quickly devised alternative methods to maintain control over their black populations. Black codes, laws that required black people to work for white employers, were banned in 1866, but their essential purpose lived on through convict leasing. This exploitative system saw prisoners, predominantly black, leased for labor, allowing plantation owners to obtain a cheap workforce. Economic dependence on this labor posed a powerful incentive for racial injustice and the disproportionate policing of black communities. Even in the 20th century, cities like Detroit saw racially biased legal practices, while violent incidents like Chicago's 1919 murder of black teenager Eugene Williams went unpunished. A stunning 2015 report confirmed that black individuals are 10 times more likely to be arrested than others, reflecting the persistence of this systemic racism. The awakening of #BlackLivesMatter. The 2008 presidential election saw a historical turnout of 64% of eligible black voters, driven by the hopeful promises of Barack Obama's campaign. However, disillusionment set in when systemic violence and racial inequality persisted. A turning point came with Trayvon Martin's murder in 2012, and the disappointing response from political leaders. Frustration sparked the birth of the #BlackLivesMatter movement in 2013, fueled by a powerful united stand against discrimination and injustice. The 2008 election of Barack Obama brought with it a tidal wave of optimism and hope for change, galvanizing an astonishing 64% of eligible black voters to participate. Sadly, this excitement would ebb away as the realities of the Obama presidency revealed its shortcomings in addressing systemic violence and racial disparities in America. The black working-class communities were dealt a heavy blow by the 2009 financial crisis, with black unemployment skyrocketing to over 13%. Yet, Obama's administration approved bailouts for the very banks culpable for the catastrophe. For many, this was the first indication that their trust had been misplaced. The brutal murder of Trayvon Martin in 2012 unveiled the stark limitations of Obama's power and influence. Martin, a black teen, was shot and killed by George Zimmerman, a neighborhood watch coordinator who pursued and confronted him without cause. Zimmerman's eventual acquittal left citizens outraged at the justice system's glaring failure to protect black lives. Obama's attempts to mollify the public with a plea for adherence to the nation of laws did little to address the undeniable bias working against the black community. In these turbulent times, black political leaders were floundering and unable to enact meaningful change. This vacuum of influence and action propelled the emergence of a powerful new movement. In 2013, community organizer Alicia Garza took to Facebook to express her frustration, posting a single hashtag, #BlackLivesMatter. Her rallying cry instantaneously caught fire, with millions echoing her message against injustice and discrimination. This avalanche of solidarity birthed an entire organization dedicated to fighting for the rights and dignity of black lives, transcending into a powerful movement demanding change and equality. Uniting for Black Liberation. On August 9, 2014, the tragic death of Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, fueled by police brutality, ignited nationwide protests and bolstered the Black Lives Matter movement. As various activist organizations emerged, uniting their efforts could lead to a stronger and more organized Black liberation movement. The small town of Ferguson became a flashpoint in the fight against police violence and racial injustice on August 9, 2014, when white police officer Darren Wilson fatally shot Mike Brown, a young black man accused of shoplifting. Brown's lifeless body lay in the scorching sun for over 4 hours, sparking a series of protests and riots in response to the inhumanity of the situation. As police attempted to subdue the protesters with tear gas and rubber bullets, the public's anger and frustration only continued to rise. In contrast to previous incidents, Mike Brown's death fueled a larger outcry against unchecked police brutality across the United States. When a grand jury failed to indict Wilson, nationwide protests erupted in major cities like New York and Washington, D.C. Black Lives Matter became a rallying cry, as tens of thousands marched to bring attention to the systemic issue of police violence against the black community. By December 2014, protests and awareness campaigns had spread to thousands of college campuses, inspiring the formation of numerous activist organizations championing black liberation. Among these groups are the Dream Defenders, BYP 100, Hands Up United, Ferguson Action, Millennials United, and, of course, Black Lives Matter. The new wave of activism is characterized by a younger generation of politically engaged black activists, diverging from the more traditional post-civil rights era organizations. Although these organizations have dramatically invigorated the fight for black liberation, many advocate differing political actions, which could dilute their overall effectiveness. By working together and consolidating their efforts, a unified and well-organized black liberation movement could make a stronger impact on addressing the racial inequalities and injustices that continue to plague society. Capitalism, racism, and liberation. The civil rights movement in the 1960s not only aimed to achieve equal rights for black people, but also challenged the powerful forces of capitalism that perpetuated racial inequality. Capitalism, by its very nature, permits exploitation by the wealthy few, requiring a political system that promotes racist ideologies as a justification for this imbalance. Karl Marx recognized the connection between racism and capitalism, as did civil rights activists who sought to unite working-class people of all races. The concept of white supremacy emerged after the abolition of slavery, creating divisions among the working class while uniting them under shared racial fears. Understanding the link between capitalism, racism, and the broader issue of human rights is essential for achieving lasting change and empowering black liberation movements.
In summary, from #BlackLivesMatter to Black Liberation, examines the deep-rooted causes of inequality and discrimination that African Americans face in the United States. With the false notion of a colorblind to policies providing a pretext for perpetuating systemic racism, black communities have continued to suffer from poverty, unemployment, and police brutality. Despite the strides made by African Americans in politics, progress has been stifled by insufficient federal investments in social programs. The book emphasizes the inextricable ties between racism and capitalism, and calls for a united front among the working class to bring about real change. Ultimately, the Black Lives Matter movement demonstrates the resilience and determination of African Americans to fight for their liberation and the pursuit of justice.